Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining. I don't think we have anyone joining from Europe or the United States, so good evening should work for most time zones of people that we have on this call. For those that I haven't had the pleasure of interacting with before, my name is Bhavna Batra. I'm the Secretary for National HRD Networks, Delhi and NCR chapter, and on behalf of the Executive Committee for the chapter, it is my pleasure to welcome you to what I'm sure is going to be an absolutely epic masterclass on the art of storytelling. Our facilitator today is someone who actually does not need an introduction. Gatik has been widely acknowledged, celebrated, and recognized as a master storyteller. And I think in the 12 and a half or 13 years that TransforMe Learning, sorry, has been offering solutions in the space of storytelling and various other aspects of leadership development. Gatik, Sandra, and the team have gained a lot of accolades and a lot of goodwill for the absolutely amazing work that has been done. But I'm not going to talk more about this. I'm actually going to hand it over to Gatik, who's going to anchor our masterclass today. Thank you very much, Gatik. I know that you are in Australia and this is much later in your evening than it is in India. So deeply appreciate you making the time to create this experience for all of our viewers. Thank you for being here today. And as promised, I'm giving you not 88, but 89 minutes. So over to you.
I love that. I love that. But don't worry about it. I've got my second coffee going strong. So I am all good. But thank you so much for having me over. I am super excited. And my excitement is heightened because I see so many familiar names and faces. Hi, Prabha. Hi, Akansha. I thought I saw Payal also somewhere here. I saw Thanga as well. So great to be in this beautiful part of this beautiful community, even if just for 90 minutes at this point of time. I know the time is short and I am joined by my colleagues, and you'll see Shraddha there. And I was telling Bhavna a while back that when we were putting this program together, I wanted to put in as much as I could because I want to give, there's so much to do in storytelling. And Shraddha kept reminding me, I think you've only got 90 minutes. You've only got 90 minutes. You've got to take this off. You've got to take this off. So if you hear me going fast, it's only because I want to make sure that I'm able to give you as much as I can in these 90 minutes. And that's the only reason. But really, really, really excited to be here. I'd like to start off by telling you a little bit about myself for many of those of you who don't know me. And some of you who know me may not also know this side of me. And I'd like to share with you a little bit about myself and specifically a few incidents from my life that have been instrumental in shaping who I am and why I do what I do, and how that morphed into my mission and morphed into TransforMe's mission, company that Sandra and I started 12 years back. And both these incidents that I'm going to be sharing with you are to do with the one person that I've admired and looked up to the most in my life, my father, who I unfortunately lost about 14 years back. So my dad was a senior officer with the Indian Air Force, a typical image of an Air Force pilot that you can conjure up, 6 feet, 2 inches tall, broad-shouldered, extremely handsome-looking man. That was my father. Obviously, the genes went elsewhere. And my dad was one of the most social, one of the most jovial, and one of the most helpful people that I've ever known. And one of the qualities of his that stood out for me was really his intent to help and serve others. And I still remember one evening, I was about 14 years old, and I came back home after playing with my friends, and I overheard a conversation between my parents, and I did what teenagers do. I eavesdropped into their conversation, and it was clear that my mother was not very happy about something my dad had done. And as I listened in, I figured out it was about my dad was about to retire from the Air Force. He was getting into a new business, and this business partner, Mr. Call, was not pulling his weight in the business. There was something going wrong with his intention in the business. And between all of this, Mr. Call was traveling to Delhi with his entire family, and he needed a place to stay. And my dad, being my dad, invited Mr. Call and his entire family to stay in our small little Air Force house for 10 days. So obviously my mom was quite upset. She's like, with all of this happening, with his intention being suspect and everything, why would you do that? Why would you invite him over home for 10 days with his family? And Dad, with a signature half smile on his face, just looked at my mom and said, if I have the ability to help someone, I will. And, you know, there are numerous such instances where he displayed this beauty of his intent to help. And every time I saw this, I think a part of it rubbed off on me. And I'll share with you the second incident. So we used to live in the Air Force cantonment, and our neighbor was a kind of a weird lady because she would always be standing by her window, right? She would watch the world go by, always by the window. And whenever my dad would go grocery shopping, he would always carry his favorite green color bag, right? So whenever he'd step out of the house with the green bag, the lady knew that Dad was going grocery shopping, and she'd call out to him, Mr. Chaujer, are you going grocery shopping? And Dad would say, yeah. She'd take out some 20 rupees, 30 rupees, and she'd say, can you get some bread and eggs for my house also? And Dad would always say, yeah, he would always oblige, and he'd always do that. So then again, I heard Mom and Dad having a conversation, having a bit of an argument in the kitchen the other day, and Mom was upset with my dad. And she wasn't upset as to why my dad was helping her. Her contention was that this woman never reciprocates. You know, she's never asked us if there's anything she can do for us. So why do you keep doing this for her? And my dad, again, sitting on that sofa right outside the kitchen with that half smile, looked at Mom and said these words. He said something on the lines of, because of who she is, I can't stop being who I am. So you see these kind of messages of, if I have the ability to help someone, I will. And because of who the other person is, I will not stop being who I am. Those are the kind of messages that I grew up around. And I guess someday this intent to help and serve others rubbed off on me at an early age. I didn't realize it back then. It's only in retrospect I realize it now, that that's what must have happened. And I can now say that perhaps it was one of the biggest reasons for me to get into training and coaching about 25 years back. Because I realized that my purpose, my mission was to help and serve people. I just didn't know how. I didn't study well, so I couldn't become a doctor and serve people. So training and coaching became my vehicle. And that's, again, with that same intention, I co-founded TransforMe 12 years back with my partner, Sandra, again, with the same mission to transform 1 million leaders, to help them become the best versions of themselves. And it is with that very same intention to help and serve that I stand in front of all of you today. Grateful for the opportunity and hoping that I'm able to help and serve and create some value for each one of you in these 90 minutes that we have together. So that's a little bit about me, and not just about me, it's a little bit also a sneak peek into why I do what I do. And through the course of this session, I'd invite you to please use the chat window as much as you can, because I'd love to hear what's going on in your mind. And it's a large group, but I'd love to hear what's going on, your thoughts. So first question that I perhaps ask you as we kickstart this workshop, and as you heard my, what you call the Genesis story, or my who am I story, my first question to you really is on the screen for you. And if you could pop it in the chat window, your responses, how did you feel? How did you feel as you listened to my story, as you went through my story over the last 3.5, 4 minutes? What did you go through? What happened for you? Relatable, Payal, authentic. Akansha says connected, emotional. All right, thank you, Surya. Oh, Divya, you're also here. Hello. Genuine, authentic. Getting connected emotionally, Morgan. Motivational, says Anupam. Genuine and relatable. So as you listen to my story, these are some of the things that you went through. Don't stop being who you are. Thank you so much, Rahul. I certainly won't. And just got to know me more as a person, Dr. Basrat. Thank you so much, sir. Personal stories can create a connect with the storyteller, where you've kind of cut to the chase. And I think I can leave the session now. My objective is achieved. 90 minutes back to you. But Apurva's absolutely right. You could picture the event as I said it, George, right? Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that powerful? So, you know, very often when I do this, when I share a story on the stage, or I share a story in a community, and I ask them this question, how did you feel listening to the story? The kind of responses I get are not very different. The kind of responses I get from folks are things like, you know, we were able to relate, we were able to connect, we were able to empathize, we were able to visualize it, right? And let me ask you a couple of quick questions on this, and just give me a yes in the chat window if this happened for you, right? Just give me a yes in the chat window if this happened to you. I'm about to ask you a question, right? And the question is, how many of you felt a level of connect with the story? Just give me a yes. If there was a level of connect with the story. Yeah, okay, great. I'm getting a lot of yeses, all right? Now here's the next question. We can start now. Here's the next question, and you can put an X for this one, not a yes, just put an X for this one. How many of you felt a connect with the storyteller? How many of you felt a connect with the storyteller? Give me an X there. Yeah, there you go. There you go. So not only did you feel a connect with the story, which is the content, you felt a connect with the storyteller. For many of you, somebody that you don't even know. And that's happened in 3.5 minutes, right? Now, let me ask you another question. For how many of you did this happen? And this is fascinating. This is interesting. This is getting into neuroscience now. For how many of you did this happen? That in listening to my story, and give me again a yes if your answer is yes to this. For how many of you did this happen, that in listening to my story, it made you think of your similar story? It either made you think of your parents or your childhood or Air Force, something. It took you down your own memory lane. Yes, 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 yes. Childhood, says Payal, right? Your grandfather was the army approval. All right, I know another brat here then, right? I see so many yeses now. You see what's happening? And that is the power of storytelling, because when a story told right, with the right context and some of the elements that I'll talk to you about, gets the other person to think of their similar story. And what do you think that's doing to us? Here's my last question, all right? There's not a yes or an X question. Write down a sentence or a word here. Hi, Natalie, good to see you. But just write down a term there, which is, how many of you in listening to the story, what do you think is happening to our relationship? What do you think is happening to your and my relationship? What word would you use to describe that? What do you think is happening to the relationship there? What do you think is happening to the relationship? There's more connections in this file. Connect, opening up. What? Trusting you, Rajkumar. I love that. Prabha says trust, right? More comfortable talking with you, right? Opening and creating a bond, right? And we hear people talk about trust, and we hear people talk about that building trust takes years, building trust takes time, building trust takes a lot of repeated attempts and so on and so forth. And that's right. But imagine having a weapon, having a superpower that can help you establish trust with an absolute stranger in 3.5 minutes. Isn't that powerful? Yeah. So that, folks, is the power of storytelling and what it can do for you as HR professionals, or just any kind of professional. And I wanted to get you started on that kind of an experience first, so that you're not learning about storytelling, but you're really experiencing it and getting to reflect on what is it doing for you. And we're going to migrate from this to business storytelling and to HR context storytelling very soon. But bear in mind, 90 minutes, I'm trying to get a lot through. I want to give you as much value as I can. We've also got some templates. Keep watching out in the chat window. I've got 6 or 7 of my team members. They're going to be throwing out some bonus content for you in the chat window. We've got templates, we've got videos, we've got ebooks. So just keep a watch out on the chat window. They've not told me the timings they're going to do that. They said, we just want to keep it a surprise for everybody. So, I have no idea when they're going to throw it up. All right. So just keep your eye out in the chat window and stay here, stay focused. In the workshop that we do, we talk about a fair number of golden rules of storytelling. We talk about 10 golden rules of storytelling. And this is a 90-minute masterclass, not a workshop. We are also doing a workshop with an HRDN for the community, and you'll hear about it very soon. But in the workshop, we talk about 10 golden rules of storytelling. Here, I'm only going to be sharing with you 2 or 3. And the first golden rule of business storytelling that I want to share with you is right here on the screen for you, which is that a good story has to be seen and experienced by the listener, not just heard or read. A good story's got to be a visual experience. It's got to be seen, which means whether you're narrating it, whether you're writing it, whether you're presenting it, the receiver has to receive it visually. So it's a visual experience. So therefore, even the choice of words, even the characterization that you put in, even when you're talking about getting a budget sign-off from your stakeholder, right? How do you make it visual, right? And we'll talk about that. I'll talk to you about the 6 elements a little later. So it's got to be a visual experience, and it's got to be experience, which means it's got to have an emotional appeal. It's got to have some level of emotional appeal, and it's got to be a visual experience. And that's the first golden rule of storytelling that we kind of put out there. Feel free to take some screen grabs. We also have some handouts coming your way, so don't worry in case you miss out a couple of slides. It's all going to be made available to you. All right, with that being said, big question, big debate, why storytelling? And, these are words that you see on the slides. These are words that came to me a few years back when I was thinking about this workshop for a particular client, we were running it. But I think this has become more and more profound and more real for me and for a lot of our clients at TransforMe as we speak to them. If you look at it, if you think about the word transactional, and if you look at relationships, and I want you to take a moment right now. I want you to take a moment right now, and I want you to think about your own relationships 10 years back. I want you to rewind 10 years back. We're in 2024. I want you to go back to 2014 right now. Go back to 2014. Don't start thinking about how you used to look, and I'll start thinking about I didn't have any white hair. So let's not go there, but let's talk about our relationships that we had 10 years back. Think about the kind of conversations you had 10 years back. Think about the kind of conversations you used to have 10 years back in the workplace. Think about the amount of time you used to spend having conversations with people at the workplace. Now I want you to think about 10 years back, the quality and frequency of conversations you used to have with your near and dear ones. Take a moment, think about it. And think about the quality, frequency of conversations that we have now. If I'm being truthful to you, I know a lot of my conversations have become a lot more transactional. A lot of more and more clients I speak to, this word keeps coming up again and again and again, that they'll be doing a leadership intervention or top team alignment. It's really about everything is becoming transactional. People are just wanting to come to the point. They get on a Zoom call, they talk work, they get the work done, they move out, they get into a meeting, they talk about the data, they get out. Right? How many of you feel that's happening in your reality, in your workplace, in your life? Give me a yes if you see that's happening. Give me a yes. Right. Yeah. Only Suma? Okay. No. Okay. A few more. Okay. Quite a few more. Oh, Nidhi, you're here as well. Good to see you. So in this world that's becoming more and more transactional, there's a beautiful opportunity for us to humanize conversations. And then in that humanizing is where we can be different. And in that humanizing is where we can start influencing, inspiring, and engaging people at a much deeper level to get things done, right? Because most people are craving humanizing, but they don't know how to start. And as HR professionals, we can take that start, at least within our organizations, really propagate this need to humanize conversations again. Interestingly, I was speaking to a client of mine who's also become a friend now. I was in India a couple of months back, and I was with him. We were having a couple of beers, and I was having a chat with him. And I've known him now for about, this is Amit, I've known him now for about, I think about 16 years, and he's been in HR through and through. And spectacular guy, spectacular talent. And we were a couple of beers down. So I asked him this question. I said, so what do you think, what's changed in the role of an HR leader, right? What's changed in the role of an HR leader in the last 10 years? And his expression was kind of like this. So this expression answered everything for me. I don't think he needed to use any words to describe what's changed in an HR leader's role, right? It is overwhelming. It is overwhelming. A lot has changed. A lot has transpired. So much has happened, and especially in the last decade, and especially in India. I live in Sydney now, and we do a lot of work globally. And when I see India as compared to the rest of the world in the context of HR, I see so much movement that's happened in the last 10 years. India is way ahead of many other countries. And many of you have got your global offices in different parts of the world. So HR has really stepped up. And what that means is that a lot more is expected of us as HR professionals, right? A lot more is expected of us as HR professionals, and that needs for us to change our approach, especially in terms of how we influence stakeholders for change and for decisions, how we inspire or position our functions, or how we engage with the organization in general whenever there's an initiative, right? It really needs us to take a hard look at how we need to change our approach. And that's where I feel storytelling can be a very, very powerful tool for us in driving that influence, in driving that inspiration, in driving that engagement within the organization, right? I'm going to give you, and at this point of time, I think Shraddha is almost ready to share the first tool that sometime soon that should be coming up in the chat window in a little while, I think. I want to take a moment and talk to you about 5 reasons why I believe storytelling is super, super critical. There was also a video that we had posted a while before this workshop. I don't know how many of you got a chance to see that as a bit of a teaser where we spoke about the reasons why. But these are slightly different. 5 reasons why storytelling is really critical, right? Number 1, as HR professionals, we need to influence and inspire. There was a time HR also used to inform. The 3 I's: inform, influence, and inspire. And I say this very categorically. There was a time HR also used to inform. Today, I don't think HR sits in that seat very often. Very often, as HR leaders, when we talk, we're either inspiring or influencing. Our job of information is gone. Right? Now, here's an interesting thing. Storytelling gets people to receive your point of view. What do I mean by that? I'm going to use an analogy of mine that is very, very popular in my circle. How many of you, give me a yes to this question, how many of you have ever painted your house or gotten your house painted? Diwali, Christmas, Eid, whatever, some function, something, you've gotten your house painted, right? So you know what the process entails, right? Obviously, first you need to find the right contractor and the right painter. That in itself is a pain in the backside. They quote you one figure, then by the time the job gets done, it's a couple of thousand more, and you're like, what the hell happened, right? But anyways, let's say you've gone through that part, right? Now, when a painter is painting a wall, now imagine you go to the market, right? If you're in Gurgaon, you go to Sikandarpur or one of those places where there's a lot of paint shops, and you buy a box of paint. You buy the most expensive paint there, guys. You buy Dulux, ultra luxury, premium royal velvet touch, right? You buy the most expensive paint and you give it to the painter. If the painter slaps that paint straight on the wall without treating the wall first, without preparing the wall, without priming the wall, if he slaps that best quality paint straight on the wall, what do you think is going to happen after a couple of weeks? What's going to happen to the paint? Give me in the chat window. What's going to happen to the paint in a couple of weeks if the wall is not treated, if the wall is not primed? And it will peel off. Absolutely. It's not going to stick. It's going to peel off. It chips off and it's not going to look nice, despite the fact that it's the best quality paint. Now consider this. You go to the same market. You don't buy the best quality paint for 5,000 rupees. You spend 3,000 rupees and you get an average quality paint. But your painter spends half an hour sanding and priming the wall. And after that, he or she applies that paint on the wall. What's going to happen now? Not only is it going to look super nice, it's going to stick. It's going to stick. And in this analogy, your primer is your story and your paint is your influence attempt. You get what I'm saying? Your primer is your story. Your primer gets people ready to receive your point of view. So just storytelling itself is not going to change your life. Let me be honest, right? It's not going to change our lives in terms of we go and tell a story to a stakeholder, to a CEO, I need a budget, I need a budget extension of $1.2 million for my HR budget, and say, yeah, great story. Here's 1.2. Let's do it. I wish that was possible. But what stories do is that they get your stakeholder in a better state of readiness to receive your point of view, right? And that's super powerful because that's half the battle done. Because very often when we're influencing, then imagine you're driving a change initiative. People are already sitting with perceptions about the change. You know that. Whether it's a new implementation, whether it's a new strategy, whether it's a new PMS plan, they're already sitting with a perception. Your first job is to prime them before you pitch to them, before you make your influence attempt, right? And that's where stories come in super handy, right? The second reason, as HR professionals, we always need to convince and get a buy-in. That's become part of our job, and storytelling is a great tool to drive a vision, to drive a change. And a little later, I'm going to be sharing with you Mark's story from Malaysia. I'm going to be sharing with you this story, and that's going to elaborate point number 2, how you can use storytelling to drive change and to change people's perceptions, right? It's a great story. We did a spectacular job. You need to establish credibility. We need to establish credibility and presence, and storytelling generates resonance. How many of you have heard the term, give me a yes, how many of you have heard the term neural coupling? I'm sure many of us are coaches here, many of us might be therapists here, neuroscience students, psychology students, neural coupling, yes, Akansha, few others. Oh, Ekta also, of course, our very own Ekta, yes. So, it's interesting, it's fascinating what we were talking about, and listening to my story, it made you think of your similar story. That's neural coupling, because people get connected to your story and they start resonating with your story. And when that happens, there is a neural coupling that's happening, which is making them believe that they're similar to you, making you believe you're similar to them. And that just makes the entire change process, the entire influence process so much easier, right? Inspiring people that this will work. As HR professionals, very often we are tasked with the responsibility of convincing people that something is going to be good for the organization, right? Sometimes we believe it, sometimes we don't, but we still have to drive that message, right? Now, storytelling can be extremely powerful in suspending disbelief. And in the full workshop, we talk in detail about one of the patterns of this. There are 8 patterns of storytelling, by the way. We're only going to talk about one here. But let me give you an example of what I mean. Just tip of the iceberg. I want to give you something. I just don't want to leave it with theory. Stories can suspend disbelief. What do I mean by that? I'll give you a simple example. So broadly, our brain can be divided into 8 regions, right? And when a person, and now with brain scans and brain MRIs, we have evidence suggesting that when a person receives information in forms of data, it activates only 2 out of the 8 regions, including the prefrontal cortex, right? 2 out of the 8 regions get activated. But when a person receives the same information in form of a story, 7 out of the 8 regions get activated, something that is called whole brain activation. 7 out of the 8 parts of the brain get activated when the same information is delivered through a story. I'll give you a few examples for you to understand this. Give me a yes. How many of you have seen a movie with a high-speed car chase? Give me a yes. If you've seen a movie with a high-speed car chase, think Fast and the Furious or something like that, right? Or if you're my generation, the first thing that came to my mind was Dawn, Amitabh Bachchan Dawn. Car chase, the last scene. Anyways, so you've seen a high-speed car. Now imagine this, you're sitting at home, watching in a nice home theater, your nice television, you're sitting on your couch, you're watching a movie with a high-speed car chase, you've got your popcorn, you've got your Pepsi, everything's fine, life is good. And you're watching this car chase, and suddenly the car swerves left and you go, how many of you have done that? Give me a show of hands. Give me a show of hands. You've done that. Yeah, come on, don't lie. You've done that. You've done that. Some of you have also spilled the popcorn, right? Why the hell do we do that? Why the hell does our body move when we're not in the television? Or you're watching an ad for a burger or a pizza, and these guys are smart. Advertisers have understood storytelling really well. Actually, that's the first function, the first area of business that started using storytelling. They show the ad of the burger and the pizza, and you start salivating. How many of you, please raise your hands. Come on, tell me it's not just me. Come on, I'm feeling stupid now, right? It's not just me, right? You see an ad for a burger or a pizza, and your mouth starts salivating, right? How do you explain that? I mean, the logical part of your brain is telling you, Dumbo, that's not real. It's in the telly. And you're like, no, I don't care. I'm going to make the body behave the same way. That's the impact of the psychology on the physiology. Stories can literally suspend disbelief, which is why that some people use it unethically as well, because it can really make people believe in anything. What was that company, this lady, the lady who used to copy Steve Jobs and had this medical biotech company? The movie is also on Netflix. What's her name? She used to have this very placid stare. I'm forgetting the name, right? She built this company of blood collection and all of that. Anybody seen that? And she raised billions of dollars from the most intelligent people like Warren Buffett. Shall if you can research that movie, if you don't mind, I'm missing the name of that movie, right? And billions of dollars, right? From most intelligent people like Warren Buffett. right? Elizabeth Ann Holmes, thank you so much, Uncle. Thank you so much, right? Elizabeth Holmes, absolutely, right? You should watch her story. You should watch the documentary, right? Billions of dollars, guys, just on a story. No product, nothing, just stories. Billions of dollars from the smartest people on the planet. Can you imagine? People who you and I would only think logically. You would tell me, Gatik, stories don't work in my business because my CEO, my business leader only talks facts and data. They only work numbers. Well, you're talking about those kind of people. You're talking about exactly about those kind of people multiplied by 10, right? So stories can really, really, really suspend disbelief, right? And if you really want people to believe that a change initiative can be powerful, stories can be great too. We need to change perception, and stories have the power to change the narrative. And again, I'm going to share with you a few examples later, but it's really age-old stories of how storytelling has changed brand narratives. Give me an I if you remember a brand called Nirma. This is also a test of generation. Nirma. Give me an I. All right. Washing powder, Nirma. Absolutely fire, right? Now everybody's thinking of that song. All of them say, yeah. So yeah, we remember. You're an ex-employee, Sonali. Brilliant, right? Now you remember the age-old battle between Nirma and Surf. For the uninitiated, for those of you who don't know, huge battle. Nirma was the market leader. Surf entered the market. Surf was struggling because Nirma was a household brand by then. The biggest problem for Surf was that Surf was 3 times the price of Nirma. 3 times. So they were not able to penetrate the market. They were not able to capitalize the market share. A lot of struggles, and they hired an advertising agency. And at the head of that advertising agency was the greatest storyteller of India. Somebody I've had the pleasure of sharing the stage with at the World Storytelling Congress about a decade back, the late Sir Alec Padam Singh. Those of you who've heard his name, one of the greatest advertisers. He was given the title, the greatest storyteller of India. And he just changed Surf's narrative. That's called changing the perception. He changed the mindset of the audience. He said to the audience through his ads of Lalita ji, those of you who remember Lalita ji, right? ये क्या ललिता जी, आप इस गरीब आदमी से टमाटर के लिए 2 रुपए के पीछे झगड़ेंगी? भाई साहब, बात 2 रुपए की नहीं है, बात ये है कि मुझे क्या मिल रहा है. So it's really about changing, not Lalita Pawar, but this was a fictitious character that she had created called Lalita, a lady in a white sari. And he changed the narrative from price to value. He said 1 chammach of Surf is equal to 3 chammach of Nirma. So 3 times the cost, you see, but the value you're getting is far greater, right? So storytelling is great to change the narrative, right? Again, I'll share an example with you where an HR leader has done that quite beautifully within an organization that we've had an opportunity to work with. So those are the reasons why storytelling is so critical. And, so whether you have a difficult message to share with your employees and you don't know how to convey it, or as HR leaders, you're in a situation where you need to influence your stakeholders in a situation of crisis, and you really have to change their tide of decision. Or imagine as HR leaders, you have to drive a large change initiative, and you know that people are not excited about it, right? All of these are beautiful cases for you to use storytelling, right? I recently did, and Shraddha, this is the time for you to probably pop in the first asset, the first takeaway for the group. I recently did a talk with Roshan Abbas, another great storyteller. I loved the chat that I had with him on a podcast conversation that he and I had a couple of months back. And we also exchanged some notes around the ROI of storytelling, right? The return on investment on storytelling. And we had a good banter. We had a couple of good laughs, but some beautiful points came up. And this was completely unscripted, right? We had a great freewheeling chat. So Shraddha is going to pop in that for you. You can save that link. You can watch it later. But we thought we'd share that with you in the context of talking about why storytelling is so critical, right? And one such example that I can think of in the HR world, and some of you may like her, some of you may not like her. She has been a little controversial in her approach, but there is nothing taking away from the fact that she is the one HR leader that has brought about the biggest radical change in organizational culture in recent times. Whether you like it or not, Patty McCord, ex-Chief Talent Officer of Netflix, the lady responsible for co-authoring Netflix Culture Playbook with Reed Hastings, the lady who says that we scrapped all processes, the lady who set up the policy of no vacation policy, no leave policy, which basically meant that employees can take leave whenever they want for as long as they want. I don't know how many of you read the book No Rules Rules, or her book. I forget her book. Shraddha, if you can find out the name of a book, if I'm not sure somebody can help. Ekta, if you can help find out the name of Patty's recent book, and if you can put it up on chat. And the reason I'm sharing about her is because Netflix Culture Handbook, how many of you have heard of it? Give me a yes. Netflix Culture Handbook. Yes. Yeah. Right. Yeah, you've read it, right? You've read the Culture Handbook. It became viral, and I think Sheryl Sandberg went up, has been quoted saying that this is the greatest revolution in the Silicon Valley in HR in recent times, and things like that. It's just brilliant. I mean, you love it or you hate it, but it's I am a huge believer in some of the points that she said, but that's about opinions. I'm not asking you to believe in what she says, but a great storyteller. That's the point I'm making. As an HR leader, she was able to have that conversation with Reed Hastings, who had the initial idea of just saying that, give me a set of 3 values, is what he asked her. He actually went up to her and he said, give me a set of 3 values for Netflix. And she, using storytelling, convinced him that they needed a culture playbook. They needed to really challenge every rule in the rule book. And then from crafting it with Reed Hastings to then implementing it with employees, some really, really radical thoughts which employees would not like, right? Especially about whether you keep them or you don't keep them and you retain them, and just communicating that through the power of stories. It's a great case on how HR can truly drive something radical and world-changing using the power of storytelling. Yeah. So if you too are on a mission of creating value and driving change that can have global impact, not just your organizational impact, let storytelling become an additional weapon in your arsenal to help you kind of achieve that. And I hope you're able to use that. So with that, quickly changing gears and getting into some action. I'm doing a quick time check. I am doing fine on time. That is good. Okay. All right. So we're going to get into decoding storytelling a little bit. All right. Now, when we started this workshop, in India in 2012. So TransforMe is the pioneer of storytelling training in India. 2012, when we started it, folks, many of you, or I don't remember meeting any of you at that point of time, maybe some of you, but many HR professionals I used to meet who were my clients, learning heads, HR heads, OD heads, I had to convince them that storytelling is a need. And I'd often hear from them that, our employees, our leaders already tell too much stories. We want them to stop. Right? So it was a different world 10 years back. How many of you agree with that? Give me an X. Give me an X. 10 years back, storytelling. 10 years back, storytelling. Give me an X. Yeah. Yeah. Because people thought storytelling is about telling tall tales. Storytelling is about Aesop's fables. Storytelling is about Cinderella. That's what we thought. Storytelling is so there's a talk that I've done, and there's a video of mine, and I talk about this difference between, and that's what we want to understand in business storytelling, and we talk about this in detail in the workshop. There's a very clear distinction between what I call pub storytelling and business storytelling. Many people who believe they're great storytellers, and they're great pub storytellers. So if I was to ask you, take a moment, if I was to ask you, what is pub storytelling? What does it sound like? What do you think pub storytelling is all about? Come on, give it a go. In the chat window, give it a go. What do you think pub storytelling is all about? What does it sound like? Pop, short and crisp, informal storytelling? Yeah, kind of. What do you think is the objective of pub storytelling? Stories about culture of that place, locality. Okay, Surya, I want to go to the pubs that you go to, buddy. I want to have those beers with you to talk about cultures of that place. Story about me and how great I am, Shraddha. Absolutely. Depends on what you're drinking. Personal anecdotes to make a point in a short time. Yeah, far from truth, without facts, just a boasted one, says Manoj. Love it, right? The idea of pub storytelling is, why do you tell stories in a pub when you're sitting with friends? And the answer is, you tell a story because you feel like telling a story. That's it. You tell a story. क्यों मेरी मर्जी? मेरा मन कर रहा है. I felt like telling a story, so I'm telling a story. That's what pub storytelling is. There is no message, there is no meaning, there is no landing, there's no beginning. It's just organic. It's not thought through, it's not planned, it's very spontaneous. Yes or no? All right. That's pub storytelling. And many people try to use that style of storytelling in the business context, and it fails. And their leaders say to them when they're making a presentation, yeah, don't tell me the story, come to the point. And they're like, oh shit, stories don't really work. Because they're using pub storytelling, not business storytelling. Business storytelling is absolutely different, because here's the first difference that I want you to understand. There are two styles of, so we're kind of decoding storytelling now, getting a bit into the science. There are two styles of communicating a message, and storytelling is a way to communicate a message, right? One is called the inductive style, and the inductive style is really where you tell people what you want to tell them, right? And I want to introduce the most important word in storytelling right now. The most important word in storytelling. The most important part of storytelling. In the business storytelling, the most important part of business storytelling is not the story. The most important part of business storytelling is the key message, not the story. Absolutely not the story. It's the key message. So an inductive style of communicating a message is where you tell people what you want to tell them, which means you tell them your key message and then you explain it, right? There's no curiosity, there's no build-up, there's no engagement, there's no excitement, there's no emotional appeal. It's blah. It's information, it's transaction, right? And on the other hand, you have something called the deductive style of storytelling, which comes from the word deduce. And to deduce means to connect the dots. And to deduce means to be mentally and emotionally involved in the process so that you can connect the dots. So a deductive style, the biggest difference that you see between inductive and deductive is an inductive style, the key message is your start point. In a deductive style, you land at the key message. You land at the key message through a story, right? And if done well, this is what makes people absolutely whole brain immersion. Right? Now, 12 years of doing this work, we've done this work for about 200 clients globally now, and it's taken us a while to put a science to this art of storytelling, right? Because we want to put a science, and the mission we were on to make it simple. The mission was to make it simple. How can we create a simple formula for storytelling? Whether people are born storytellers or they're aspiring storytellers or they're structured storytellers or unstructured storytellers or introverts or extroverts, how can we create a structure, a formula that can help most people? Because remember, our mission is to transform 1 million professionals, right? And therefore, we said that let's first solve for the mistakes that people make in storytelling. And we realized that the biggest mistake, that the first mistake that people make, and I kind of alluded to that, and this is golden rule number 2. Golden rule number 1 was, if you remember, a good story has to be seen and experienced by the listener. Golden rule number 2 of storytelling is, don't be a bird. Let me ask you a question. Why does a bird sing a song? Why does a bird sing a song? I'm not going to make this stuff on you. A bird sings a song because it feels like singing a song. A bird sings a song because it can sing a song, right? So when I say storytelling, don't be a bird, don't become the storyteller who's telling a story just because you want to tell that story. The biggest mistake that storytellers make, unless you're on a TED platform or a platform like TED where you've been invited to tell your story, your own personal favorite story, don't make the mistake of telling the story that you want to tell. The job of business storytelling, especially in HR, is to be able to tell stories that others are going to listen to in a way that others are going to receive. As simple as it sounds, that's the biggest mistake people make, that we end up telling stories that we want to tell and telling them in the way we understand it best. So what we did, and I'm going to be sharing with you Mark's story right now, which is one of the most exciting stories that I've heard from one of my clients, but we have built over these last 12 years a very simple triple loop formula of storytelling, which consists of 3 parts to storytelling, which is an outside-in process, which basically means you start by looking at the context, working through the context, and there's a process to that. We're going to share a template with you. Then you define the key message. Once you've got the key message, then you reverse engineer and find a story which lands at the key message. You see what I'm saying? And this is a fairly important, as simple as it sounds, fairly important process for us to ensure that we're not getting trapped in telling the story that we want to tell. Let me give you an example. And this example, listen to this, guys, because there's going to be something coming up in the chat window related to this in a little while. But also because this example will help you understand this better. So a few years back, I was working with Mark, one of my clients in Malaysia, and Mark, an HR leader for a leading tech organization. And I had coached, me and my team of trainers, we had coached and trained a lot of people on storytelling in this company. So Mark was a believer in storytelling. This is pre-COVID, by the way, right? So Mark called me one day and he said, Gatik, I'm in a spot of trouble. I need some help. I said, all right, how can I help you? What can we do, buddy? And he said, I've got a presentation coming up with my senior stakeholders and my CEO, and I'm struggling to figure out how the hell do I get these guys on my side. And I thought I could pick your brains on the kind of story I could use to kind of convince them about this. I said, all right, that led to one coaching session that I had with Mark to help him craft that story. And when I asked him first, I said, so what's the situation? So Mark was really driving a change in the organization. He was implementing a new CRM system in the organization, very heavy sales organization. He was implementing a new CRM system. And the sales leaders and the business leaders in this organizations felt that the CRM system that was being implemented was very complex and complicated. And the people were not using it. They didn't like it. They're like, there's no ROI for this. There's no benefit. So complicated, so complex, just scrap it. We'll get something else. So Mark was struggling to convince them that this is the right CRM for you, right? So when I sat with Mark and I asked him, I said, so what's your key message, Mark? What do you want to tell them? His first message to me was, he said, my key message to them is that this is the right CRM for you. Now, the moment he said that, I intuitively knew that that was a key message that's not going to sit right. Because just imagine, your stakeholders are already sitting with the perception that this is not the right CRM. And you as the HR leader walk up to the room and say, good morning, everyone. I'm here to talk to you about why this is the right CRM for you. What do you think that's going to do? What do you think that's going to do? Give me a word in the chat window. What do you think that's going to create? What do you think that's going to create? They're sitting saying that this is not the right CRM. And you start by saying, I'm here to tell you why this is the best CRM for you. Aversion, mind block, disengaged, resistance. You've already put them on an offensive or a defensive, not in an engaged style, right? Discomfort, absolutely, Manpreet, right? Resistance, absolutely. So I said, look, buddy, let's go back, right? And then he gave me the key message, going back to the triple loop formula. If the key message wasn't right, I needed to go back to the context. I said, you need to tell me the context. What's going on? Why do they not like it? He said, you know what? They just keep saying it's very complex, it's very complicated, but it's got these algorithms that we built in, we've customized it, so their revenue planning can be streamlined, they can do the forecasting, the invoicing, everything, but it's just very complicated with the user interface. And so as he spoke to me, he kept repeating the word complex and complicated. And he also kept adding guaranteed results. So as he was speaking to me, I kind of felt that there was an opportunity here to change the narrative, like with Surf and Nirma. So we worked for about 45 minutes. And at the end of 45 minutes, Mark came up, at the end of that 45-minute coaching session, Mark came up with this story. And this is what he did. By the way, this got implemented in his company that very year. It's now running quite smooth. This is what Mark did. So I'll give you a before and after of Mark. Mark, the HR leader, without storytelling, inductive style, would have communicated like this. The sales head, business heads are sitting, thinking this is the worst CRM. It's too complex. It's too complicated. Scrap it. I don't know from where our HR leader has got this. I will get my own CRM. That's what they're sitting with. Mark enters and Mark starts off by saying, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me here. I want to start off by telling you that this CRM is the most appropriate CRM for you. Let me show you how. That's how he would have done, right? Now, this is what Mark did instead, using storytelling. He started off by saying, imagine I'm Mark, started by saying, good afternoon, everyone. When I went to college 17 years back, all right, here's a quick cue for you. Again, be ready on the chat window. What are the 4 words that every fairy tale starts with? You know it. Come on, 4 words. Every fairy tale starts with them. Same 4 bloody words. Not years ago, 4. Once upon a time. That is it. Once upon a time. The girl's laughing. She's like, yes, I know this one. Once upon a time, right? Now, we're not going to use once upon a time in the business context ever. But the point I'm making is that for those of you struggling with how do I start a story? Some people don't know how to start a story. This, by the way, I'm kind of skipping the gun. Shraddha, sorry, I'm moving out of content. I'm skipping the gun. I'm talking about something that we do in the actual workshop. But for those of you struggling to figure out how to start a story, a good way to start a story is to start with a reference of time. That's the easiest way to start. 3 weeks back, 7 years ago, when I was 14 years old, 10 o'clock in the morning today, that's the easiest way to start a story, right? Start with a reference of time. So going back to Mark, Mark started off by saying, 17 years back when I went to college, I had to choose a subject that I wanted to major in addition to HR, because I had to use 2 majors. I chose finance in addition to HR. A lot of my friends at that time told me, why are you choosing finance, such a complex and complicated subject? Quick note here, insert keywords. This is NLP, Neuro-Linguistic Programming in Action. Your anchor words that you will be landing on later, you make them a part of your narrative. You see what I'm saying? So Mark said, my friends told me, why are you picking up such a complex and complicated subject? I said, no, I want to do finance. But, you know, folks, let me tell you, at the end of the first year, late one night, having had 4 cups of coffee, preparing for my finance exam with a headache, I really thought I'd made a wrong decision because it was a bloody complicated subject. Repeat the keyword. Very, very complicated subject. But anyways, I put in the effort, I got decent grades, and I passed out of college with fairly decent grades in HR and in finance. And what that experience taught me is that now he's landing on the key message. What that experience taught me is that sometimes things that are complex and complicated are the ones that actually get you results. And the reason I share this with you, ladies and gentlemen, is because I believe many of you are wondering why we have the CRM. It's so complex, it's so complicated. And you're right, it is complicated, it is complex. We're trying to make it better. But I'm here to tell you that it's the only CRM that's going to give you the kind of results that you need in your business for your revenue forecasting. Let me show you how. The primer is set. We're at least more willing to receive the paint. How many of you get it? Give me a virtual thumbs up or a real thumbs up. How many of you get it? Right? Okay. And how many of you liked what Mark did? If you liked what Mark did, give me a heart emoticon. Is there a heart emoticon? There, it's difficult. Give me a heart emoticon, or do your heart like this, or do something so I know that you loved what Mark did, right? Did you like what Mark did, right? I think he did a spectacular job. I think he did an awesome job. I think he did an even awesome job because he had the courage to use a storytelling style to influence business and sales leaders on a topic like a CRM implementation. You see that? Now, that is the power of storytelling in changing the narrative. But please understand that the key here is really in understanding really in getting to the key message, right? Between a story and a key message, and I often say this, many people over-prepare the story and under-prepare the key message. And what that does is that it gives you style without substance. You see what I'm saying? The story is just a means to an end. The real skill that we need to learn as HR professionals is story crafting, so we can land at the relevant key message and get people on our side. the story becomes a way to get them engaged, get them excited, get them ready to receive that message. Right? So keep that in mind. And please keep the questions coming up. I think Shraddha put that point earlier. But please, yeah, somebody's put down about, okay. So please put down some questions, because at the end, we'll have some time for Q&A. I'd love to take your questions. I'd love to get your questions. If I can't answer them, I'll go back with a question that I need to find an answer for, which I also love. But please keep your questions coming. Please pop in your question. Thank you so much, Shraddha, for the quick summary there as we get into the first hour of the workshop, I think. So that's the triple loop formula for storytelling. And, you know, this is just one example that I'm sharing with you of many, many, many such examples. And I wish I had time, and I think I'm going to share with you one or two more examples. But time for some myth busters, right? And one of the first biggest myths, and in having spoken to many HR leaders, many HR managers, not so much leaders, that me and my team speak to, one of the things that we often hear, and my trainers, we've got about 25 trainers who run storytelling courses now globally. One of the common things that we keep hearing as a myth, which of course gets busted by the end of the workshop, but it does come up, is the fact that, look, you know, guys, business stakeholders don't like stories, right? We are HR, we get it. We understand the emotional appeal and stuff like that. We understand the landing, the key message, but business is really about hard numbers. They're those left brain guys, you know, they just want to get, they're analytical. They're in the disc, they are this, in the MBTI. We profile our business leaders and we say that they're not, they don't like stories because they only like facts. So my response to some of those myths are in our program, in our design, which is that stories, first of all, the reality is that stories are facts, not fiction. And that's the first myth that I want to break for you. Business storytelling, at least in the way TransforMe does it, is about authentic storytelling. Our definition of a story in our workshop is, a story is what we call an RSI. I don't know if that's in the template, Shraddha, I forgot. But a story in TransforMe's language is what we call a RSI, which stands for a real specific incident. So what's a story? It's a real specific incident. It's not something that you're cooking up. It's not something that you're making up. So it is a fact. It is not fictitious, right? The reality is that stories can have data. In fact, there's a beautiful combination of stories and data that can happen. For those of you who've not seen, and if somebody from my team can quickly research and pop in the video TED Talk of Hans Rosling, the late Hans Rosling, 2007 or 2006, I think that TED Talk was. He unfortunately passed away about 4 or 5 years back. Watch this TED Talk when Shraddha puts it up in a few minutes, Hans Rosling. And it's a great example of how you can marry storytelling with data. When we run the full workshop, we talk about 7 principles of how you can do that, but this video is a good Kickstarter for you to get a sense. Another myth about stories don't need to be emotional. Stories don't need to have a lot of emotion, right? All stories don't need to be a Karan Johar movie. Some stories can be a documentary, right? Stories don't need to be long either. Every story does not need to be a 3-hour story. Stories can be a 30-second trailer, right? And there are 8 different patterns where we talk about how you can use short stories, long stories, data stories, non-data stories, emotion stories. But we need to understand that stories are in different forms, and there's many, many different things that we can do with stories. I'm sorry, did I hear somebody trying to say something there? No? Was it just me? Okay. Okay, I see some questions are coming up. That is beautiful. Thank you so much. Please keep them coming. All right, then. A few quick things. Just doing a quick check on time. I think we are still good. I want to give you more. We will be sharing some templates, some resources, and an exciting bonus is coming up for those of you who stay on till the end. There's a special bonus that Shraddha and team have got. Now, this entire work that we've been doing around storytelling for the last 12 years is based on the 2 pillars of storytelling. And you need to, as professionals, look at storytelling from these 2 pillars and what I call telling the right story and telling the story right. Telling the right story and telling the story right. You get these 2 things right, you've got it, right? So on a lighter note, when my team and my trainers and everybody does this, it's a joke that we started and now everybody follows this joke. It's beautiful. In a workshop, if you see our trainers in different rooms, they're all cracking the same joke sometimes. But we ask people that, tell me a situation, and if you're in a room where we were talking, I would have asked you this question, that tell me a situation where stories won't work, right? And people are a little shy, hesitant. They're like, okay, the trainers are talking, so maybe stories work everywhere, but some people have the courage and they say, this situation stories will not work, that situation story. And we kind of try to break those situations down by giving them examples, telling them that stories pretty much work in every situation. And I make the joke that I say that stories only don't work in only one situation, where you don't tell the right story or you don't tell the story right. And rest everywhere else, a story is going to work, right? So 90% of the times, either your story is wrong or the way you're delivering the story is wrong. And that's what we need to check. That's what we need to change. Rohit has raised his hand. Rohit, if you have a question, can I request you to pop it up in the chat window if you don't mind?
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Rohit. Thank you. We will have a Q&A session, and I'd love for you to ask your question then. The telling the right story and telling the story right, if I was to talk about, and very soon I'm going to share with you one particular pattern that you're going to get a template for, that you're going to practice. But the first pattern, that the 8 patterns of storytelling are right here on the screen for you. These are the 8 different patterns that we do in different workshops that we run. And these are based, this is not mine, this is not TransforMe's, this is developed by a gentleman named Stephen Denning. Stephen Denning is the world's foremost thought leader in the space of narrative intelligence. And he's written a beautiful book called Leader's Guide to Storytelling. Those of you who are still feeling a little, shy about attending a masterclass on storytelling, you're feeling like if you're going to go back home to your partner, to your friends, to your colleagues, and they say, what were you doing? I was attending a workshop on storytelling, and they laugh at you. So if you're feeling a little shy about telling people that you attended a masterclass on storytelling, you can actually tell people that you attended a masterclass on narrative intelligence. Suddenly sounds a lot more sexier, doesn't it? So narrative intelligence is a term coined by Stephen Denning. I can't take credit for that, but that's really what it is. It is storytelling, and he and his organization have done tons of research in the corporate world, in the business world, to come up with 8 different patterns of storytelling that you can use in organizational context. Companies like Nike, companies like Eli Lilly, companies like Accenture, companies like Google follow these to the T. Not just these, they've created their own patterns. In fact, Nokia, when Nokia went down and under in 2006, 7, the leader at the helm of affairs, the CEO at that time, Stephen Alok, wrote a memo which got leaked to the media, and it became a storytelling pattern of its own. So if you go on the internet and you type burning platform story Nokia, you'll get a pattern of a story, which is the burning platform story. And how do you communicate a very difficult message? Because he had to literally tell people that many thousands of them are not going to have their job tomorrow. And he used a story to convey such a sensitive information, right? And it worked out. So some brilliant examples there. But for the sake of this workshop, we're going to talk about one pattern, which is sparking action and springboard. I want to give you an example. I want to leave you with a template, and then there is the master bonus that you're going to get right at the end of the ebook. So that's telling the right story, these 8 patterns. We'll come back to this in a little while, but let me talk to you about telling the story right. You've got the story. How do you tell the story? So you've got the context, you've got the key message, you did a reverse engineering, you found a real specific incident from your past that you can link up. Now, how do you deliver it? What do you do? Now, I want you to think about the story that I told about my dad. How many of you still remember the story that I told you about my dad about more than an hour back? Give me a show of hands. How many of you remember? Virtual hand or physical hand, whatever you're doing, just emoticon or real hand. Okay, I can't see many screens here. I'm seeing. Are folks here? I see black boxes. Yeah, should be there. All right. So you remember that story? And how many of you remember Mark's story? Give me a yes in the chat window if you remember Mark's. Oh, some people were doing yes. Okay. So you remember Mark's story as well. All right. Now, I'm going to give you some of these 6 elements of storytelling. And I want you to think about the story I told and Mark's story. And I want you to see how you experience these elements, right? Number 1, characters. Stories must have characters and characters must have names. Every story must have characters and characters must have names. Even if you want to change the names should be there. Characters give life to a story and names make the character real. So quick quiz question in the chat window. All right. My dad started a business with somebody who he allowed staying in our house for 10 days. What was his name? Let's see how many of you were listening. Mr. Call, there you go. Absolutely. So there is a character. There is a character, right? My client in Malaysia, HR leader trying to convince. That was my story. I was telling you how I coached Mark. There you go, right? I shared with you more examples. The point I'm making is that every story has characters and characters must have names. Even if you have to change the name, do that, right? Don't ever start a story in a business presentation or a formal setting saying that, 3 years back when I used to work with my earlier manager, give a name. On my last organization, when I used to work with X, you want to change the name for confidentiality reasons, do that. And you can say things like, let's call him Amit. That's fine, right? People get it, right? But have a name that just makes it easy for people to visualize, because many of you have created a visual image of my father, by the way, right? And many of you, if I hadn't shown you Mark's image, would have created a mental image of him. Number 2, anchor words and phrases. Number 2, anchor words and phrases. This is where we get into NLP. Give me an X in the chat window if you remember the 2 words that Mark repeated in his story again and again to drive to the key message. What were those 2 words? Write those 2 words or give me an X if you remember it. Complex and complicated, Ranjana. After I said it, I realized I gave you 2 instructions, right? X and complex. Okay, complex and complicated. Absolutely, right? That is anchor words and phrases. Know what you're going to be landing at and then land there. Make the landing smooth. Scenery, make it visual. Now, how visual you want to make it really depends. Really depends. How much time do you have for the story? Is the stakeholder you're presenting to, is he or she have the visual appetite? Does he or she enjoy it? So, Payal, if you're telling a story to Neeraj, you can make it visual. You can add a little bit more scenery. But maybe somebody else, you don't want to add that scenery because Neeraj may enjoy that scenery. Others may not, right? So some people enjoy a Karan Johar movie, some people don't. You have to take that call, how much scenery to put in. But the simple golden rule is at least one visual moment that people will remember. One visual that's going to stick with them. How many of you remember the color of my dad's bag that he used to take grocery shopping? Tell me the color of the bag in the chat window right now. The color that my dad used to take, green. Absolutely green. Now, this is stamped in your brain. I can guarantee you, you may forget 90% of what I'm going to tell you in this workshop. You will never forget the green bag. At least for the next 1.5 years, you're not going to forget it. All right. So that's what visuals do. It helps retain that information, specifics, incidents within the story. Make sure there's conversations. I came, he said, she said. Make it conversational, make it light. Transitions, keep it smooth. Easiest way to do this is to write it, but then go with the flow. I've been telling this story about my father for years now, but each time I tell it, I try to relive it. Sometimes some words come out differently, right? So those are the 6 elements of telling the story right. But coming back to the exciting bit of the formula, the process, to all of my left-brain people, my friends here who love some structure, what does a springboard story look like? So first of all, what is a springboard story? In fact, let me take a step back. What I'm going to encourage all of you to do is 2 stories that every professional must have. 2 patterns that every professional absolutely must know. The first one is a springboard story, and the second one is the who am I story, right? I don't know if Josh is here, Shraddha, Joshua is here, or if you have Sudipta from marketing. Sudipta, if you're here, if you can relate to Josh, or if you can find it, there's a LinkedIn video that I recently did. Satyam may have that around who am I story, the genesis story, the backstory. It has the process of that. If you can also post that link, please. Sorry, I hadn't planned for this, but I thought might as well share that. I'd love for you to have your who am I story at least, right? And watch that video. We're going to share that in a little while. It's going to give you some techniques. Take a look at that, get an idea of what you can do. And the second one is a springboard story. A springboard story is going to be the most common story that you're going to use from an HR perspective, in my opinion, because it's a story that you use to drive change. It's a story that you use to spark action. It is a story that you use to influence stakeholders. It's a story that you use to do a lot of things that HR professionals need to do, right? So what is a springboard story? A springboard story follows a simple process, which is right here on the screen for you. And in a few minutes, Shraddha is also going to be sharing with you a template. So you can keep that with you after a little while, Shraddha, if you don't mind. So the process of crafting a spring. So when would you do a springboard story? When you have to influence a stakeholder, or when you have to drive a change, when you have to change the perception, right? In those situations, you would use a springboard story. Now, you remember the triple loop formula? So somebody in the chat window can tell me the 3 layers of the triple loop formula. What is the first? What is the second? What is the third? Somebody in the chat window real quick, if somebody can go. The triple loop formula of storytelling starts with, what do we start with? What do we move to? We start with context. Yeah. And number 2, what do we get to then, Vinisha? We start with context, and then we get to the key message, and then absolutely. Thank
Story.
you.
Story.
Perfect. Thank you. So that stays the same for everything. And if you see here, the first step of a springboard story is to build clarity on your key message. So you build clarity on your key message. You think of a similar past situation, similar problem to solve, like Mark did. If you remember Mark, he did that. He thought about it, finance. You build the character context and dilemma, craft the character's experience. And then you transition to the current state problem worth solving, right? Another client, another quick example I can share with you on Springboard, a client I was coaching, an HR manager, Jasmine, in Singapore. HR manager, she has been driving a new initiative in the company around well-being. This was back in 2018. Well-being was still a bit new. They launched some therapy, counseling, call a life coach kind of a thing in their organization. It was very confidential, who was calling, who was not. A lot of money was being spent, but some leaders were questioning, what is the result? What is the value? How do we kind of quantify it? And she was finding it hard to justify what's happening. And she had a chat with me around what story can I use? How can I do it? To tell people that, look, this is happening behind the scenes. It's kind of invisible, but it's creating so much value, whether in our NPS or wherever. I need to tell that story. So she actually ended up going on stage in front of her leaders. When I say going on stage, in the conference room, and she actually said to the leaders something on the lines of, and she built this, by the way, I was just coaching her, she built this story. She said, this was in Gurgaon, and she entered and she said, good morning, everyone. This morning I came, so this morning is again once upon a time, reference of time, right? So this morning I came in from outside, high pollution outside. I was watching the television, the AQI level, the air quality index was very bad. I was coughing. But the moment I entered the office today, I was able to breathe fresh air better than a few weeks back in the office. And I was like, wow, this is clean air. What's going on? I went to the reception and I said, how come the air in the office is suddenly so clear? I don't see any of those big, air filters or anything like that. And the housekeeping told me that, that the air filters are installed. Reception told me that the air filters, we've got new air filters installed, which are hidden in the air conditioning ducts. They're invisible, and they're the ones that are helping you breathe. And that's when I realized that sometimes things that are invisible can create such a huge impact for us, and we don't even realize that they're there. And that's the wellness initiative that we've been running for the last 12 months. And that's what it's doing for us as an organization. You see what I'm saying? So she used a springboard story, again, to influence her stakeholders. So with that, Shraddha, if you can pop in, if you've not already done that, if you can, you've done that, is it? No, that's the video on Who Am I? But can we pop in the template, please, of the springboard pattern? This is a beautiful template. It's a very easy to use template. You can take a printout. You can use it in PDF form. My very strong encouragement for you would be, I would give you a task, which is before 30th August, next Friday, which is my birthday, incidentally, so I'll remember that date. Before 30th of August, try using one springboard story with one stakeholder using the template. Practice one springboard story with one stakeholder using the template and share your experience with me. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to hear, or put up a post on LinkedIn, tag me if you'd like to, share with the world, but do experiment. Do give it a go before the 30th of August, before next Friday, right? So There's lots more that I wanted to give you. There's lots more, and I'm itching to go, but I'm also sensitive to the time that we have. And there's another pattern, there's another framework, there's quite a bit of stuff that I'm going to skip this. I'm just going to pause now and check with you as we kind of get towards the closure, and we've got 15 minutes left. I've shown you the springboard pattern, one of the 8 patterns. We've understood the triple loop formula. We've listened to a couple of examples, understanding what these patterns are. Good time for us to take maybe 10, 12 minutes for any questions. Shraddha, are you going to be helping facilitate that? Payal, you're also 30th? Wow, I never knew that. Yeah, happy birthday to you.
Yeah,
I'll
same.
celebrate. I'll have an extra drink for you. Brilliant.
Got
Didn't know
it.
that. Thank you, everyone. So those are the ones wishing me that. But yeah, open to questions. Shraddha, are you curating the questions, or are we just
Yes,
opening it
Gatik.
up?
I can help facilitate this. So let me put
Thank
the first question, which came from Maithili. I'll put it on chat. I think. How do you use storytelling to
What-
deliver bad news?
That's a great question. That's a great question. Yeah. So the 2 points that I'll perhaps share on this question. I think, first of all, it's a great question. How do you use stories to deliver bad news? One is, do read up the burning platform pattern. If you just go on Google and you type burning platform Nokia, you'll get that pattern. And it's a great example of how do you deliver bad news through a story. It's a brilliant, beautiful example. It's become a case study of its own. But beyond that, there's a particular pattern. One of those 8 patterns, if you remember I was sharing, is a pattern called sharing knowledge or learning from failures. That's the pattern that is specifically used to communicate bad news in a sensitive situation, right? And the idea behind that is to, so again, there's a method to that, and I don't want to get into that framework, but that is the pattern. There is a pattern to that, which is called sharing knowledge. And the other angle I would give you is read up on the burning platform story. But I think with bad news, the biggest thing, like with the triple loop formula in the context, is to understand what's the biggest pain point for the audience that you want to address. So if it's about a layoff or something like that, what's going to be the biggest pain point? If it's going to be about the monies, then you've got to address that. If it's going to be about how much time, then you've got to address that. So how do you identify what's the biggest pain point in a sensitive situation and make sure your story is landing on that? And like that, we've got a couple of variations there. But for now, I'd just say burning platform and sharing knowledge pattern. So what else, Shraddha? Do we have a second question, or do I just pick up anything from that's coming up from here?
We have a second question by Ranjana. How to end a story where it works in my or my team's favor?
How do I end a story where it works in my or my team? So, Ranjana, if you can help me understand this question a little bit, if you want to unmute yourself and just ask that question, that'll be super helpful. If Ranjana is still here. And we have the bonus coming up in a few minutes, Shraddha, if you keep that ready, please, because I'm just keeping my eye on the clock. We've got about 8-9 minutes.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, I can, Ranjana. Yes,
Yeah,
go
hi,
for it.
hi, Gatik. So, the reason why I asked that is, most of the times what happens is, when we're trying to, propose a solution to, let's say, a problem within a team, when I go to leadership, so they say, I mean, this is the second time I've got a feedback saying that, your start is very well, but, till the end, I did not get the main point, what is it that you want me to work on, or what do you want from us? So even though I very specifically say that, how do I end it that it stays on their mind? At least they give it a thought.
Yeah. Great point. And I'm tempted to give you a lot of thoughts, but I've not heard your story, so I can only assume right now, Ranjana. But I'll tell you a few things. Number one, I suspect your landing on the key message is not accurate. I suspect what's happening is that when you're telling the story, you may be going in a little bit of a loop or a roundabout manner. You're trying to land at the key message, but you're not quite landing there, which is confusing your audience on what are you really trying to say? What are you getting at? It's almost like you're sitting on a plane and the pilot is flying the plane, and you don't know whether the pilot is going to land in Delhi or Bombay because they haven't told you where they're landing. And you're sitting there anxiously waiting, where are we going? Are we going Delhi? Are we going Bombay? And the captain is not telling you. So, you know, the plane has not landed, your key message is not landed. That's one. Number two possibility could be that you're trying to mix two key messages with one story. And therefore, there's a bit of confusion that's happening there. That could be another possibility, right? Number three could just be that your story is too long. One of the other challenges of storytelling is that people know how to start a story very well, but many people don't know when to stop.
I think point two, I think, is a little relatable. I think I tried to squeeze in more than a point. So probably that is taking away attention. That's what I think right now. When you're saying it, I'm trying to link. So yeah, I think that would be the issue.
Thank you for taking my points. And please use the template that Shraddha shared. Maybe that'll help you.
Yeah, I'll definitely do that. Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome. Sangeeta's question is, to convey the story to the target audience, is it necessary to have experienced that story?
My takeaway from your speech is storytelling sometimes misleads. It definitely so. Triple loop formula, this context, key message, and the story, all this is giving a good lesson for us regarding storytelling. And another point what I have gathered is RSI. The story should be real and it should be specific and there should be incidents oriented. So this is giving a good lesson for us, for people, to address people with some relevant stories. And you have also told about two pillars, telling the right story and telling the story right. These three formulas to be used, that definitely it helps us to build confidence in people who are listening to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Although I'm not sure whether you were able to listen to me, sir. I received your feedback with grace. But are you able to hear my voice as well?
Oh, sure.
Perfect. No worries. Absolutely. I would quickly segue to Sangeeta Jaina's question on, to convey the story to the target audience, is it necessary for us to experience that story? Great point. There is, and I'm putting it down in the chat window, there is a model that we talk about in our full workshop, what is called SOO. So, Sangeeta, there are three types of, once you figure out your key message and you're trying to find a story, first of all, the answer to your question is, it is not necessary for you to have experienced that story. Because you can tell a story of self or of other or of outsider. I've written it down in the chat window, SOO, self, other, outsider. Self means that you're sharing an experience that you have experienced. You were the protagonist or you were a part of that experience, right? When you tell a story of an other, it's a story of somebody who you've seen doing it. Like I told you Mark's story, I told you Jasmine's story. It's their story, but I saw it. Do you see that? Or you could tell the story of an outsider. For example, I told you the story of Elizabeth Holmes. She's an outsider. I know of her through the internet. I don't know her personally. So self, other, or outsider. And the reason this is very helpful is because as you move from self to other to outsider, the one thing that changes or reduces is the emotional appeal. The emotional appeal reduces as you move from self, where the emotional appeal is highest, to other, to outside, which is not a good or a bad thing. It's just important for you to know. For example, if you know your stakeholder and you want to use a story that has less emotional appeal, go for an outsider, go for another. Don't get into a self story because that will have higher emotional appeal. Brilliant question. Love it. Thank you. Do we have time for one more question? Just checking. Are we good on time? Yeah, we are.
Yes,
right.
Gatik, we can take one more question.
Shraddha, there's a question from Rohit. How to respond when somebody tells you that you spend a lot of time to set a context? Shraddha, this question is for you and me in the TransforMe meetings, by the way. Huh? When someone tells us that we spend a lot of time to set the context, nobody has the luxury of time to fully comprehend a viewpoint and instruct it. I get you, Rohit. I hear the pain, my friend. I hear you. I am a victim of this. I'm a propagator of this. I am all of this. and I can't claim that I have the answer, but I have an opinion. I have a couple of suggestions. I don't know. So I'll come to how to respond later, but what to do in setting the context is important. So one of the golden rules of storytelling, I think it's golden rule number 7, but that's in the full workshop. We say, start the story with the story. Never start the story by building context. Start the story with the story. The story starts with once upon a time, right? The story doesn't start with the reason I'm telling you a story is because and da 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 da. Because the moment you do that, one of the biggest advantages of storytelling is the novelty. Right? Now I'll give you an example. Give me a yes if the answer to this is correct. How many of you have seen the movie Spider-Man? Give me a yes. Come on. We're answering Rohit's question. We're still answering Rohit's question. Give me a yes if you've seen Spider-Man. You've seen Spider-Man? Okay, good. Stop. Now give me an X if you saw the Spider-Man with that guy. Kaun sa tha wo? Sabse pehla wala kaun tha? What was his name? The cute guy, yeah? What's his, who's now old? What's it? Tobey Maguire? Did I say it right? Yeah, Maguire? Yeah. So Tobey. So X, how many of you saw Tobey Maguire as Spider-Man? Yeah, you saw that? Great guy, right? I think he's still the best Spider-Man, right? Now, after Tobey Maguire, there was Andrew Garfield, right? Give me a Y if you saw Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man, his movie as Spider-Man. Give me a Y, those of you who saw. Yeah, good, great. I love it. I'm a huge Avengers fan here. I've got what my daughter calls my toys right here. But okay, so yeah. And then how many of you have seen Tom Holland's Spider-Man? Give me an A. Give me an A. Give me an A if you've seen Tom Holland. Oh, yeah, okay, great. What's the problem with you guys? Haven't you gotten the plot as yet? You've not got the plot. Bar bar dekh rahe ho Spider-Man. Samajh nahi aayi that movie. Let me explain to you what happens in the movie. Every movie is the same. There's a guy called Peter Parker. In every movie, the name is the same. In every movie, he's a 16-year thin science geek. In every movie, he has a love interest. In every movie, he goes to college and a spider bites him in his arm. And in every movie, he wakes up the next day with muscles and able to climb walls and all of that. In every movie, he wears a red and a blue suit. In every movie, he fights crime and he's called the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Why the hell do you watch the movie again and again when the pattern is the same? And let me guarantee you, there's a new Spider-Man that comes. We all will rush to the theaters and we will still spend our money and watch that movie. You know why? Because every movie has something that has a novelty. There is something new. The actor is new, the suit is new, the villain is new, the problem to solve is new, the love interest is new, right? So going back to your question, Rohit, and now people have said so much yeses, so I'm going up to Rohit's question to make sure I get. So people like novelty, and when you set too much context before getting into a story, you've lost that element of surprise. So a great way to use storytelling is to just straight away get into the story. Now, when somebody tells you that you're spending a lot of time to set the context, then people tell me that in the middle of my story, if somebody interrupts and says, get to the point, what should I do? I get to the point. Because sometimes it's so weird that somebody's telling a story or somebody's making a presentation or telling a story and your stakeholder says, yeah, you know what, I really don't have time for this. Can you just get to the point that you're making? And imagine if the presenter at that moment says, yeah, just give me 2 minutes more. Really? Why would you do that? You see what I'm saying? So don't become a bird. Remember golden rule number 2. Don't tell the story just because you want to tell it. You didn't land it well. It's not landing well. Change it. Get to the point. That's it. As simple as that. There's a lot more I could have shared, Rohit, but I hope these couple of tips give you something there. And I don't think we have any more time for any more questions while I'm super tempted.
Gatik, can you address my question? Sorry, I just posted it in the chat box.
I apologize. I think we are really at time. So it may be a good idea for you to connect with Gatik on LinkedIn. I'm sure he will indulge you.
I'll go to his birthday and ask him this question.
Yeah.
Let's talk on the phone, Payal. We've got our numbers. Let's talk on the phone. Happy to do that.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's pretty much it. Just before I hand it over to Bhavna, Shraddha's been waiting for a long time. So please, I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. Here's the QR code if you'd like to connect with me. I started off by sharing with you about who I am and why I do what I do. And I shared with you my mission and TransforMe's mission of enabling people to become the best version of themselves. And my intent in the last 90 minutes has been to help and serve this community and to give you as much value. Even though I may have spoken fast, it was only because I wanted to get as much out there as I could, pack it all in. But thank you so much for having me over. And just before I hand it over to the NHRDN team, Shraddha, if you can pop in the bonus link to the group. Oh, there you have already done that. Awesome. Thank you so much, Bhavna, for having me over, and handing it over back to you.
Thank you so much. As they say, story abhi baki hai. Gatik, thank you for an incredible session. For the benefit of all members, this was just a teaser, a masterclass that we wanted to invite everybody into. It was fascinating that we had, as I said, 900 people register for this across 100 cities, right, and 650 organizations. So clearly there is appetite to take this further. So there will be information that will be published about a full day program from TransforMe Learning on storytelling skills for HR. More information on that coming your way. So if you'd like to take your learning forward and hone your skills even further, do please join that. Those will be day-long paid sessions, and we'll share the details with you. Thank you very much, Gatik, and everybody from the TransforMe Learning team, Shraddha, and everyone else. Your partnership is fantastic. This is just the beginning. I know I have a few tips, and as someone who loves fairy tales, once upon a time will definitely come back in my lexicon. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day ahead. And Gatik, thank you very much, and have a good evening ahead.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.